action. I can't get no call to action, but I try, and I try, and I try.
Hello and welcome to Call to Action, the go-to podcast for anyone trying to make sense of the world of marketing, business and beyond. In an industry that is a minefield of utter bollocks, we aim to capture our heroes and allies from the front line to have a chinwag with. It's like Pokemon Go, with the single but vital exception that it's not a short-term bandwagon of shite. It's brought to you by Gasp, and I'm Giles Edwards. Today I've caught Alex Horne. Comedian, lead singer, author, silly sod, and the Ryan Reynolds of Chesham United, Alex is arguably best known for creating and co-hosting the BAFTA-winning cult TV show Taskmaster. Alongside Greg Davies, the only man in comedy big enough to call him little, he sets out to test the wiles, wit and wisdom of comedians through a series of tasks teeming with tomfoolery. He is also the creator and frontman of six-piece band The Horne Section, a keen bird watcher, and was once a genuine contestant on Countdown, winning a hat-trick of episodes. Alex says, Taskmaster has been years of total enjoyment. Anything with The Horne Section is mucking about with friends. Even going on those weekend cookery programs is brilliant. If you're not having fun making TV, you're doing something wrong. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks, Giles. I really enjoyed that introduction, and I feel a bit like I'm on Desert Island Discs now, so thank you.
Good. I love Desert Island Discs.
Should I point out any factual inaccuracies now?
Yeah, go on, let's do it.
I think there were two. My dad is a keen bird watcher. I'm a keen bird watcher. I like watching the bird watchers, less interested in the birds. Part of my job as Taskmaster's assistant is to teach everyone that it's Greg Davies, not Greg Davies.
Yes.
Very important. I think everything else... Oh, I can't sing. Apart from that, everything else is fine.
I don't think I claimed you could sing.
Well, you call me a lead singer and the people in the band will instantly turn off. They call me the lead speaker.
Do you have a weak lemon drink when you watch the bird watchers?
I have a strong drink when I watch the bird watchers. I've spent hours in hides watching them, but they're fascinating people.
Nice. Right, 7 quick-fire questions, Alex. Vowel or consonant?
I would always go with a vowel.
Barney Rubble or Boo Boo Bear?
Middle son's called Barney, so I'll go with Barney Rubble, please.
Nice. Anfield or the Meadow?
Oh, wow. Is it forever? Or is it just my instinct?
Instinct.
Currently, the Meadow.
Nice. Number 4, Countdown or Cats Does Countdown?
Great questions, Giles. I'm going Countdown.
Nice. Favourite season, spring or February?
It's February.
Right, 2 more. No more jockeys or We Need Answers?
Oh, well, if possible, I'll go We Need Answers.
Easy. Lastly, Chicken City or Egg United?
None of these questions will mean anything other than to me, but I can't remember which team I played in. I'll go. I
thought that might happen.
I'll go Chicken City. Not a clue.
Well, Chicken City won, so great, good shout.
Oh,
listen, Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
We always start the show by asking guests about their sometimes linear, more often not so linear route to where they are now in their career. So can we start the show by asking what was your first ever job, and then what was your first proper job in comedy or TV?
Yes, of course. My first ever job was waiting for my GCSE results down in Sussex, where I grew up, on a farm. Me and my brothers and I, we all worked on a potato sorting section of the farm where we stood either side of a conveyor belt. A man in a tractor lifted up the whole field, put the field on the conveyor belt. Things rolled past us, mainly potatoes, but if we saw a mouldy potato or a toad, we had to pick up the mouldy potato or toad and put it down a chute. So only the potatoes would go into the sieve and the correct size potatoes would fall into sacks. That was my first job. Did a summer of that.
Nice. Did you enjoy it?
I really enjoyed it. I think it taught me a lot. There's a lot of waiting, just standing, thinking, and occasionally touching toads. And then in lunch breaks, the whole farm would come and play cricket in the sort of courtyard area. So it was sort of idyllic, sort of dirty. All sorts of people worked there and taught you about being patient, and the pay was awful. So but enough to give you pocket money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, so I've got 3 boys myself now and trying to work out when they should start working. But I think that's not a bad year after GCSEs.
Yeah, you make it sound like there's a lot of toads on potato farms.
You'd be surprised. It was at least one an hour, and it was always a moment. It kept you going.
And it wasn't the same toad.
That's a very good question. No, and I also don't know where they went when I put them down the chute. I never asked. It was sort of Charlie in the Chocolate Factory situation. They went, and I hope they went to a better place.
No, and then doing bunny years. What was your first proper job?
Well, I guess there's 2. Well, I worked as a journalist for the West Sussex Gazette, interviewing people. A very, very, very lowly journalist. Yeah, interviewing people about wedding anniversaries and reviewing. I reviewed one strip show at the Chichester Festival Theatre, an all-male strip show I had to review. And then I got a job in tele as a runner on Big Brother. And not even a runner, a logger on Big Brother Series 3, which is where you have to watch what happens. And I'm very good at typing, and you have to type up all the action. And you do 2 hours on, 1 hour off, and they give you a berocca at the start of every shift so you don't die. And that taught me a lot. Both those jobs taught me a lot. I don't know what, but I'm sure they did.
And did you, at that stage, the reason we asked this question, Alex, is because I find there are so many people who are trying to start a career in whatever industry they're looking to break into. And I think a lot of the anxiety that's kind of wrapped around that situation is just that context of believing there's a right way into whatever profession it is that you want to pursue. So did you have any intent to pursue a particular career? Was it comedy? Because your background is, I think it's fair to say, you had a very privileged background. You went to a great school. You progressed to Cambridge University. Instinctively, I would assume that there was quite a serious academic within you.
Well, it's something I used to be really embarrassed about, both boarding school and Cambridge. But I didn't have an awful lot of choice, I suppose. But also, I don't think I would encourage. So my kids don't do either of them, and normal school in the town where I live. But that's partly because they've got good schools around me. Anyway, but I still definitely got a slight chip on my shoulder about the privilege. But there's no denying it. And I guess I was quite good at, school. My degree was in classics from Cambridge, so you can't get much more sort of elite, I suppose. Elite in a horrible way. But I never wanted to go down that route. My granny was an academic as well. My granddad was a geologist who studied the rocks from the moon. So they're all, that's sort of in our family, I suppose. But I know I was thinking writing, journalism, or comedy. Comedy, very much a hobby. Never thought of a career path, but was always keen to give it a crack, I suppose.
And how did you first give it a crack?
Well, so I did go to Cambridge, and there is a thing there called Footlights, which everyone's heard of and no one understands, I think.
Yeah.
All it really is a comedy club where you go, you audition, you have to, in front of sort of 5 people. It's one of the most terrifying gigs I've done. You have to do a minute of comedy in front of these 5 people, just standing up, talking. And if they think you're good enough, then you'll go and do an open spot in a theatre in front of 200 Cambridge students who are also fairly intimidating because they all think they're the best.
Yeah.
But so it's quite a good training ground. And that's what Footlights is really. It's just a comedy club. So I did comedy there every 3 weeks. And there's a tour show which creates the actors that the sort of Stephen Fry's and nowadays, most of the people from in-betweeners, every year, amazingly, people come out of it. But you can just do stand-up, and loads of great stand-ups come out of it. So my generation was people like Mark Watson, Richard Iowadi was just ahead of us, John Oliver. Mel and Sue were about 3 years above them. So it is amazing. Every year there's a new generation of comics. But I think that's because some comedians are sort of the academically gifted type, and absolutely not all, and you definitely don't need to be. But if you are, then you're more likely to apply to Cambridge than anywhere else because this tradition of Footlights, and you think, well, I want to follow those people, I suppose.
That makes sense.
So I don't know. It might be not quite nominative determinism, but just self-fulfilling prophecy or something. That's a lot of waffle. Sorry, Giles.
No, not at all. How is Footlights perceived within the university itself? Because I know it's obviously accessible within the university, and if you go to Cambridge, it's something that presumably is easy to have access to. Yeah. Apart from how intimidating it must be to have that conveyor belt of past talents and the collective egos of having to perform in front of your own kind of students.
Yeah.
Is it perceived to be as significant as it is from the outside looking in when you're actually within it?
No, No, you're just another group of losers in a society. You know how if you're not in that tribe, no one pays any attention to it really. Losers is definitely over egging it. But yeah, so you'd have the rugby players or the football players or the drinkers, whatever, so that you have your people, and hopefully you do lots of those different things. And for me, university was just about making friends and trying things out. But no one thought Footlights was special in any way. And I should say, though, you don't have to be at Cambridge University to do Footlights. So people from the town can audition to be in anything or just to turn up and do a comedy night. And my good friend Tim Key, who is a long-time colleague but longer-time friend, he also didn't go to Cambridge but did Footlights.
Okay.
So it is actually surprisingly welcoming to all sorts. And I think that's really important, but definitely no one knows that. And there's still a preconception that it's full of toffs in boaters punting up the river. But it really is. It's not a huge window on the world, but you have all sorts doing it.
I wondered about Taskmaster, where you really don't want the young, sporty comic to run away with it each season. Is there anything around the way you formatted the show and the way you award and reward those completing tasks that is a nod to your time at Cambridge, or is that a stretch?
Oh, maybe. I mean, who knows what's going on under the surface. I do definitely try to make sure there's enough tasks to reward any type of person. So if you've got a young buck or an older, less fit but more experienced comedian, they've both got an equal crack at winning the thing. I don't know. I think it probably is a stretch, Giles. I reckon.
I thought it was.
Yeah, I think that's just because you want a nice mix of stuff on the telly. Yeah, but let's give me more credit than I deserve. I'm always up for that.
So how was the format of Taskmaster born? Because that was, the origins can be traced back to Edinburgh. But
Yeah.
if you looked further back, is there anything else that led to that?
Well, I suppose so. I mean, yeah, I have thought about this. And as kids, we played games all the time, and we didn't have screens. And we're all, as parents, worried about how much time our kids spend on screens. We did play on the Amiga occasionally, but we did make up a lot of games in the back of the car, number plate games, pub sign games. My older brother was amazing at turning anything into a cricket game. And we invented rules all the time. And any little game, it quite often was just throwing a stone into a hole, turned into an epic sporting event. And that's sort of what Taskmaster's based on, turning a tiny moment into something grander, taking it really seriously. And then you've got this 6'8" man in a suit on a throne judging you. So it's really sort of turning nonsense into something much more,
Yeah.
I suppose. So yeah, and my parents were good at playing games with us. At Christmas, we'd always play Consequences, or we had this game at Christmas every year involving a pineapple and counting the leaves. So there was a tradition of games, which I suppose has rubbed off on me. And then, I went to Edinburgh for years. We had our first kid, so I couldn't go to Edinburgh. So I decided to set up this grand game. And I emailed 20 comedians and said, do you want to take part in this thing? Every month I'm going to set you a challenge. I want you to email me with how you've got on. And at the end of the year, I presented this thing called The Taskmaster in Edinburgh, showing these comedians doing these various things. They didn't know what each other had done. And it was just so obvious it was a competitive world comedian. They were so desperate to be better or funnier than each other. So it was kind of immediately obvious it was fun, but it was never meant to be a telly show. It was just meant to be a one-off Edinburgh thing. And then we did it again. And then someone said, oh, you should pitch that really as a telly thing. So it was, I think, an accidental stroke of luck. And I reckon that's the case of a lot of, good movies or books or songs. You don't often sit down to have the idea. You have the idea and then you sit down, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you've probably inadvertently answered one listener question that we had in from Ben Toes, who asks, so much of the Taskmaster brand seems to have been there right from the start. How much was meticulously planned and how much was the result of constraints and necessity?
Oh, great question, Ben.
I suppose if you add serendipity to that, it's kind of the latter, right?
Yeah. Oh, I always believe in the phrase that I can't remember about something, necessity being the mother of all invention. And I really like limits. We have a budget for each task, which is a couple £100. So we don't like having big bits of equipment. We like people at home to be able to recreate it if they wanted to. So that helps in terms of what the task looks like. But I also need to give huge credit to a man called Andy Devonshire, who's the director. He's been the director since the beginning. And we worked together on a documentary before that. And he is in charge of the look of the thing and is really scrupulous and caring. I think caring is probably a real key to the show. But also there's a lot of luck that we happened to film the first series in the Clapham Grand, which is this old Victorian theatre where they used to have elephants on stage. And that's given the look of the thing, all the gilded colours. So we've just tried to recreate that every time. The house, we stumbled upon it and it's got a look and it's tumble down and slightly enigmatic or peculiar. So yeah, all these factors just landed on our lap, I suppose. And in terms of the format, we got lucky. Again, like we came up with this format of a prize round and 3 tasks and a studio task, which we thought, oh, that'll work. And it did. So we just haven't mucked around with it. So yeah, luck, some skill, but by Andy. And there's a producer called Andy as well, who's very hardworking and funny. So just lots of combinations of things that worked. But also so much luck in telly. Someone commissioned it after 10 people turned it down. The key is getting a second series of anything.
Yes.
Which is so tough to get because everything improves on the second time round and it's so easy to cancel stuff. I think every TV show should get a second series.
Just by default?
I really do, yeah, because you only learn on the first series. People discover it later, especially with sitcoms. When sitcoms are cancelled after one series, I think it's ridiculous.
They haven't really bedded in the characters or the plot, I suppose.
No, you spent all that money and all that effort. So, yeah, luck.
I've given a brief nod in your highly flawed, it seems, intro that I gave to other works of yours. And obviously there's the books and there's the previous shows and, well, there's all sorts really that you could plug. In the quote, I said that if you're not having fun making TV, you're doing something wrong. Did Taskmaster and formerly the Taskmaster feel like the most fun you'd had doing anything? And so it wasn't therefore a surprise the success that you subsequently had?
Good question. Also, I do need to apologise. I thought your intro was brilliant, and I'm sorry for picking holes. So it's one of the most fun things, but I always say I really like having the mix in my life. So I still do the band every year, and so they're my oldest friends. We went to primary school together, some of them, and next year we're doing a little tour. So having that alongside Taskmaster means I'm really happy because they're both really good fun. But if you just did one, it might weigh you down a little bit. But it was really fun doing it. So we did think, oh, we might be onto something. My little brother actually came to one of the records at Clapham and said, yeah, actually, this might work. And he was really surprised. So I think it was definitely infectious. I think it's infectious that the comics are having fun. But the first series we got slightly wrong. We did something called Show Zero, which is like a pilot, except it's already been commissioned. So it's a sort of testing out the format. And in that, Greg took it very seriously. He's like a pantomime villain and he had a cane. And we sort of were less fun. We were less, whatever they did, we weren't going to be happy with them. And we realised, actually, these people have tried really hard. Like Frank Skinner and Josh Widdicombe were saying, no, we did our best on this, so why were you so mean to us? So I think, we learned very quickly that fun was a key aspect to it. And it's seeing grown-ups behave like kids a bit, not just sat behind desks being smug and snarky.
There's so many shows that exist where everyone is in the same situation, just sat behind a desk performing.
Yeah, even in the studio, them just being in chairs with no place to hide is quite interesting because they're sort of exposed there, but they've got each other. They're sat very close to each other when there's no pandemic.
Do you think they feel intimidated for that? Well, you did say it's a very caring environment.
I think I would a bit, but as in, I like hiding behind things. I like having a prop or, something, and you're just sat there and everyone's looking at you. But it's a gang thing, really. We're all together, and the 5 of them have often become really good friends, and they've kind of gone through this thing together. So no, I think it's not. It might look exposing, especially with these 2 men, and I'm aware we're 2 quite big, white,
magnificent men.
Yeah, okay. But it's horrible, really, that we're judging these people. But hopefully, everyone knows it's tongue in cheek and silly and so on. I mean, I wish, Giles, I was a woman. Or I wish Greg was, to balance it out. But other countries, they do have a female Taskmaster, and it is better.
It was really popular in Sweden, right? Alongside, other regions.
Yeah, Sweden's probably the biggest one. They have a big Saturday night programme, like Britain's Got Talent or something. And yeah, their Taskmaster is a wonderful lady. And it's really nice to have, it just looks slightly less archaic than having these 2 emperors say, no, that was bad.
But how appropriate is that, though, that this is British? I can understand that not maybe travelling so well, but I think it fits, right?
It fits, but I think if it was being commissioned now, so much has changed. We've only been going 8 or 9 years, I think, and so much has changed. And we're embarrassed by our first 3 series. We had 4 male contestants, 1 female.
Right.
And you look back and say, what were we thinking? That's insane. And, it's not a case of we couldn't get away with that anymore. It's more, we would never think that was a good idea anymore. So we've all moved on a lot. And I think if you were commissioning it now, you would have a better balance throughout. Not for any box-ticking thing. It's just better. So for the junior Taskmaster, we've got Rose Matafeo is the Taskmaster and Mike Wozniak is the assistant. And it's just, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being Greg, especially Greg, but it's good to have a mix of society.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are just better for it. And actually there's significant studies that show that businesses typically perform better when there is a diverse collection of people. And I mean diversity in the truest sense. Yeah,
not easy to get there, I think, and trying to balance these numbers means you are going to go through a painful bit, and that's inevitable. But I think, we feel lucky that we're established now, so we have a sort of responsibility to represent the industry better and show female aspiring comics or more ethnically diverse young people. They've got every much as chance of ending up on telly as the white men from Cambridge.
Yeah, well said. There's a quote of yours which is, "I'm lucky because I go to work and just do silly things all day," without trivialising the wonderful silliness behind Taskmaster. And let's be honest and fair with the Horne Section and so much of your success. Are you surprised with how well it's been received in different territories? Because that sort of stuff doesn't necessarily travel, because so much of that to me seems very British, whether you're thinking of, say, Monty Python or even Rick Mail.
Yeah.
There's an element or a thread of silliness that sometimes doesn't travel. So why has this travelled and performed better, do you think, than maybe other shows with a wonderful silliness?
Yeah, I don't know at all, unfortunately. I completely agree. And I always feel self-conscious in interviews where I sound really serious about what is definitely a stupid waste of time. It really is silly. And the Horne Section is 6 men nearing 50 years old being really silly and talking about or singing about the toilet and, swearing lots. And I think the older you get, the funnier it gets, actually. I'm hoping Greg and I carry on into our 70s and the band carry on into our 80s, because there's nothing funnier than old men or old people being silly, I think. And I guess giving it gravitas by wearing suits and still being silly helps that, I think. And we're really trying to stay on the right line of being silly but not wacky. And it's really hard to pin down what that is. But we do try to be quite formal about it. But in terms of how it's travelled, I don't know. I hope there's an appetite for silliness all around the world. And I do think, actually, people are pretty much the same everywhere. And people often say, Americans don't get British humour. But they really do. No, I'm not saying there's no differences, but Taskmaster does really well over there on YouTube mainly. But in a recent episode, I put up a QR code at the start of the show, which people had to, if they wanted to, they could pause their telly and see what I was doing. And it's just some link to a secret website. And 25% of the people who did the QR code were in North America. And they were all watching it. It's not on telly there, but it's all on YouTube. So, yeah, so they definitely do get British humour. So I think hopefully, let's hope there's just a unifying thing that humans are dumb and enjoy being silly and not being serious.
Yeah, but I don't think there's anything wrong with suggesting that silliness is really important. And actually, perhaps the older you get, the more you realise that having fun, and whether it's being playful in life or whether it's trying to entertain in business. So much of what we do in ad land should be about driving fame, and it's hard to become famous if you're not entertaining or you're not kind of delivering something of value, if that doesn't sound too kind of wishy-washy.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, I don't know anything about advertising, but any ones I remember from my childhood are all this, it's a Tango advert, isn't it? It's a overblown, silly, fun
Well, Rowan Atkinson, the Barclaycard ads.
Yeah. But it's really hard to make an advert not seem like an advert. You know what I mean? It can't be forced. It's got to be naturally funny. And there's lots that get it right. I like the Just Eat adverts. I saw one last night. I think it had Christina Aguilera in, but I think they get it really right, this sense of wow, this is nonsense. And I love, when they've got these amazing musicians being silly.
Yeah. Is that where the line is then, maybe between, you said silly and wacky, and there's a line between the two? Is it silliness that's like really intentional, but clearly there's an intelligence behind it? Because I don't want to embarrass you, so we can maybe even say about Monty Python or something, where it's taken, the silliness is taken so seriously that it isn't just wacky. To me, wacky is almost like a cheaper kind of for the sake of it.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I guess for us, it's even like in the wording of the task. We always say you've got 20 minutes, your time starts now. We'd never say you've got 13 minutes and 12 seconds, your time starts now. And it's stupid, but we just have this thing that formal language really helps the silliness. Yeah, and taking silly things seriously. So yeah, you're probably right. And Monty Python's a good example. We watched it all the time as kids. And it was often people in suits. I saw one recently about a sketch I'd not seen before, I think, but where each guest on a chat show, one of them could only use the start of a word, one of them could only use the end of a word, but they took it so seriously. And that's, yeah, you're probably right. I think you've probably nailed it.
Let's just conclude I'm right.
Yeah.
There's also the escapism, which again I've seen in our research. You talk about how perhaps the context of the world, and I think at the time you were making a point to the pandemic and COVID, and how people maybe needed that escapism even more. But let's be honest, if you take a look around what's happening in the world, it's horrific, and there is a wonderful escapism that you deliver through Taskmaster that is probably needed even more than ever.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is a horrible thing to say, but the pandemic it really helped the show, because the show completely accidentally helped a lot of families who were stuck inside looking for any sort of escapism. So, there was no cynicism to it, but people did seem to turn to it a bit, which was, you hate to profit from a disaster, but it was amazing. That was when it hit home that actually people, need is a strong word, but we had so many people get in touch and said it really got us through it. So, so Greg and I did this thing called home tasking, which was, I think one parent got in touch, said, is there any chance we're homeschooling that you could set our kids a task? So we set a task, put it on YouTube, and then thousands of people did it, and then hundreds of thousands of people did it around the world. So we sort of felt, it took us a lot of time, actually. We set these videos up, we edited them, Greg judged them, and it kind of got us through the pandemic as well. So it was selfish for us too. And that was just a nice thing to, it sounds awful, but to sort of give back, and it wasn't a profiteering thing.
Doesn't sound awful at all. The home tasking. And there's Taskmaster education, right? Which is inevitably going to involve a lot more children developing key life skills.
So I've done it in my kids' schools. Once a year, I go into year 6, a classroom of 30 kids, and I do a day of task for them. And the teachers are brilliant there. It's a local primary school, and they just say, right, do what you want. And they make a huge mess. They rip things up, and they get dirty, and they scream. They do the task like, get as far away from me as possible while screaming. And the whole school stops, and it's brilliant. But the kids really get so much out of it. And again, what we were saying earlier about they can't all just be appealing to the young, sporty ones. It's got to be the thinky people, the collecting people. And it's great in a classroom. Like a good example is a task. You give them each a ball of string. Normally the kids are in teams for school tasking. Give them each a ball of string, and you have to work out how long that ball of string is. You've got 5 minutes, your time starts now. And often the boys will just unravel the string and chuck it around the place with no plan. And the girls, and I hate generalizing, but the girls tend to sit and talk for 3 minutes before doing anything. But it's really great. And then the quiet kid will say, I know I'm 4 foot tall, so just wrap it around me and count how many times. Or they'll know the classroom is 5 meters or whatever. But it's really great seeing their brains work.
Yeah.
And one of the keys is not to worry about upsetting them. When you say who's won, who's lost, they don't care. They are so resilient. So you've got to take them seriously. You've got to say, that was awful, that was great, and move on to the next one. So yeah, school tasking's been really fun. So we do these after school clubs, and yeah, it just hopefully will make them happy at school, I suppose, and show them that they can use their brains in different ways.
Time, weather, and...
Today's podcast is sponsored by No One. Whether you need research, brand, or strategy, No One brings you absolutely nothing. With simple templates and drag-and-drop tools, you can have a great-looking nothing in minutes. If you have a real marketing challenge you'd like to chat about, though, just email giles@gasp.agency and use the offer code GILES to get 10% off nothing. Brought to you by No One.
Time, weather, and...
I was going to ask how many tasks do you think you've come up with, but we did have a listener question from Rachel Chancellor, and she's calculated, she thinks that you've come up with about 700. She asked, how do Alex and his team keep the creativity coming? And do you have a standard process you follow for brainstorming and validation of your ideas? Because I know that's something that you very much sits with you, right?
Yeah, so that is my job, really, is coming up with the tasks. And I can't take full credit. So there's a team, so I come up with them. The team might suggest some, and then I sort of put mine out into the group and we test them out and filter them, and some don't work, some do, and some need finessing. But it's a good question, and I would hate to put a figure on it because that would be scary, and I'd think, oh no, there's only 10 left in the world. But I think I'd really think they're infinite. They're like songs, again, aware that I'm sounding self-aggrandizing, but they're sort of like jokes. They're not going to run out. But it's the system is you have a deadline, and then you're forced to work. So that is sort of the work bit, but I really enjoy it. So what I'll do is, I know, for example, at the moment, we're doing Junior Taskmaster, and I've got to come up with 8 studio tasks in the next couple of weeks. And that's really not that hard for me. But I've also got to come up with a load of tasks for the next series. So I'll go on lots of walks, lots of drives, and I'll just think about it, but in a really loose way. So I won't think, right, we haven't done a task involving a sieve. It's more, I will literally just let my mind wander and see what happens, which is a really sort of frustrating answer, I think. But I do, you sort of lean on a lot of experience. So I know what works, I know what doesn't. I know what we've seen and what we haven't seen. So I just sort of let my mind wander, and I sort of imagine these 5 child contestants, and I think, what would be quite funny if one of them, or say if they walked into a room and all the lights were flashing, and your brain will give you a starting point, hopefully. Or you might get an inspiration from the radio or something, some word, some key word like drain pipe will pop into your head, and then you just sort of let a scenario play out, and you just don't try to pin it down too quickly. And after half an hour or so, something will solidify, and I've got to write it down immediately, or stop the car, or do a voice note. And it's just trying to sort of capture these little fleeting ideas. So yeah, it's really loose, the process, but I'm also very confident that if I go for an hour's walk, I'll come back with 3 solid answers.
And do they tend to come easier when you're really up against it in terms of time deadlines? Because that seems
yeah, they really do. And then you're in that zone of, right, come on then, we've got to get this done. And it also helps if it doesn't help. Sometimes at the end of a series, we've just finished one, I will then be in the great zone to think of more tasks. But equally, sometimes you're on holiday and your brain goes, right, we're ready to come up with some ideas for some reason. So there's no real forcing it. But yeah, deadlines are the key to most things in my life.
Yeah. And you're not averse to borrowing either. You've said, I took the family on a camping trip and the youth leader asked the kids to run across the field while shouting. They had to run as far as they could before their breath ran out. I thought, we'll have that.
Oh, completely. Oh, any situation in life, I will nick an idea. Yeah. Even if it's like the AA coming and changing a tyre, and you think, so it's not necessarily, hopefully it's, like you say, borrowing rather than stealing. But also we've got this weird world where all these different countries make the show and they come up with their own tasks. So quite often we will, again, be inspired by them. We try not to copy something wholesale, and it's always with permission, but we, taking something as a starting point and changing it. But I also love seeing our comics do their task and seeing how differently they do it. But yeah, there is this pool of ideas floating around the place.
Have you got a favourite task that you've come up with?
I really, really don't, because they do blur into one. But I would say my favourite type of task is one where it's just one line. Like, I guess an early one was, I think series 1 was get the most tears in an egg cup. You've got 20 minutes, you time stuff out. And, when it's just that, and then the following series was get the most sweat into an egg cup. And I do like it when it's just, right, we know what's happening here. This is what's going to happen. Because nowadays we have to have so many rules because the contestants know what's going on, and they will always move the finish line if we don't say you can't move the finish line. And we sort of done all the major bodily function ones that we're allowed to do.
Yeah.
But occasionally something will pop into your head which is really simple, and you go, yes, that is going to be great.
Amazing.
So I've got a few up my sleeve which I'm really confident about in the future. So yeah, the well hadn't run dry yet.
Fantastic.
But I think wells don't run dry, do they? Unless there's a disaster.
Yeah, I don't claim to be a well expert, but
no.
I'll take your words. I'm mindful of time, and I do have a few listener questions. But before we move to those, just for my own personal reasons, and because I've been mildly obsessed with the Horne Section for about a decade now, I'm guessing.
Oh, great.
I read that you're all middle children.
Yeah, pretty much. Not. It doesn't quite work. But
Okay.
the three of us who grew up in Midhurst together. So our mums were all friends, and they became friends because of our older brother. And then we were the middle ones, and then we've all got younger brothers as well. And the older brothers have tended to get quite sensible jobs because of the weight of the family on their shoulders. Yeah, we've all gone off to be creative. So I think that really there is a pattern, but it's only a pattern of 3 people. So I'm not necessarily saying it works for everyone.
Okay, we're significant-ish.
Yeah.
Do you treat your middle child any different?
No, but I can see that out of the 3 of them, he's the most like me, and he's the one we definitely ignore the most because, the older one, so much pressure, and I'm really aware of not putting pressure on the older one.
Yeah.
But it's inevitable. And the little one, you do baby a little bit. So, yeah, I can see it happening. I absolutely could. If any of them were going to have the unpredictable job, it would be him.
Right. Amazing. Right, I better get to listener questions, Alex, quickly. So, asking the general public for their opinion, be it on Brexit or boat names, is notoriously fraught with danger. That's not stopped us asking. So I've got quite a few. I'm going to cherry pick a couple. Just to crowbar it back to the world that I suppose I operate in, we've had a question from Paul Bailey. If you think about your brand, what musical instrument would your brand be?
Yeah, great question. Probably the trumpet. I grew up playing the French horn, which is a huge mistake because it's too difficult and I had to stop after grade 3. But I like brass. I like that it's just a thing. There's no moving parts except for the valves. But, it's got history and it's cheeky. The trumpet's fun. You can have it at a cricket match.
Yeah.
And you can carry it in not quite your pocket, but on your person. And it's quite formal but fun, and it can play pop music or classical. Trumpet is my answer.
Nice. Question from Claire Petzel. She says, out of seeing many comedians go through hundreds of tasks, is there a lovely human insight you've taken away as a life lesson, or any specific type of activity that brings out the best or worst in people?
There's probably loads of insights that I can't pin down, but it's really a warming experience of spending these time with these comics, often great comics who I, am in awe of, and they sort of get humbled and also have moments of glory. But I think what I would take away is that they're all team players and they get the most out of it as a group, which sounds really saccharine, but that them watching themselves back as a fivesome is the most heartwarming bit, and they always appreciate what each other's done. So, yes, I think there's definitely something. Comics are quite solo normally and quite proud and a bit of competition. And that is eroded away. Even though this is a competition, they're all brought down and they're all brought down to the same level. And, yeah, it's definitely been heartwarming in general, but I can't pin my finger necessarily on why.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. Tom Hadley. He's included a word I'm not too sure how to pronounce, so forgive me, bear with me.
Right.
I'd love to know what Alex thinks about, is it precarity?
Wow.
Precarity, and how we talk about it, because most comedians live pretty financially precarious existences, which the rest of us are now increasingly experiencing. How does anyone talk about that with authenticity, empathy, and some positive humour?
The state of being precarious or uncertain, apparently. Persistent insecurity with regard to employment or income. Great word. I've not heard it before. Yeah, I mean, my wife and I often talk about it, that when our first son was born, we really didn't have anything. We don't want to be, I'm from a privileged background, so I'm fine. But we didn't, we were on a budget. We couldn't, once a week we'd have a coffee from Costa because the rest of the time we couldn't afford it because we just had the first kid, and we, this is with the background that we were fine, we were secure.
Yeah.
But there was no sense of pension or, it was a worry. But I think we always had some faith. And again, this is probably because we had this nice, secure background behind us and our parents were encouraging. So it's really easy for me to say, but we just had some faith that if you keep working hard and trying hard, in comedy at least, there is some meritocracy and you can always make your own work. We're all self-employed, and you can, if you work hard enough, you can get employment. as long as you have some level of talent. And with comedy, if you do, you can't be a comedian if you're not funny. It just doesn't work. So I think I think my self-belief comes from working, knowing that if you work hard, you'll get somewhere. And I think that's probably it. And I think I don't have enough experience, but I think that's probably true in a lot of industries. But equally, there's a lot of unfairness around. And I love comedy because it is meritocratic. And even nowadays with TikTok and YouTube, which is a sort of worry to us old school comedians, but actually it means you can create your own work and you can make your own YouTube channels and do things. So yeah, I think I'm of the belief that if you work hard, you'll be all right.
Yeah, great answer. I think that accessibility is key as well. I recorded an episode recently with Tim Plester, who's a wonderful, wonderful man. He was probably most known for his role in Afterlife, Ricky Gervais' show. And he made the same point that when he first started, it didn't really have the accessibility wasn't quite what it is now in terms of whether it's TikTok or YouTube, as in anyone can publish a video with relatively kind of few means.
Completely. Yes, Munya Chihuahua is a good example of that, who was kind of the first comic we've had on the show who hadn't gone up the ranks of the open mic circuit and then the comedy circuit or the sitcom circuit. And he was just a self-made comedian, which is brilliant that you can do that nowadays. So, yes, it is a good thing. It does mean there's an awful lot of stuff out there which isn't so good.
Sure.
But that's the same in the stand-up world as well. So, yeah.
Law of averages. Isn't it? I think we've got about 5 more minutes. So I'm going to move to our final 4 pertinent poses that we put to all of our guests, Alex.
Okay, love it.
They start with number 1. What advice would you give to your younger self?
My advice would be, I think I'd still say don't smoke and don't do drugs. I got away with that. My dad told me not to. For some reason I listened to him and I'm so glad I didn't smoke. And I'd also say, make sure you stay friends with your friends. And one of my skills, I didn't really stay friends with anyone. I don't quite know why. And I sort of regret that a little bit. So I think your friends from childhood are really important. So make loads of friends and don't smoke.
Don't smoke, yeah, okay. Nice, good advice. Number 2, if you could banish one thing from your industry, what would it be and why?
I think it would be looking over your shoulder. I haven't really got a physical thing with the comedy industry, but I think if I could banish professional jealousy, that would help people's lives so much, because I think we've all got this problem of, even if you're doing well, you think you're not doing as well as that person, or you're jealous because that person's won an award, and it's all meaningless. And if you can just be happy with how you're getting on, I think that would help everyone mentally.
Yeah, well said.
Quite tough to banish that, but if you can eke that out of people's brains, that would be good.
Number 3, I don't know if you're a reader, Alex. I know you're a writer. Are there any books that you can recommend to our listeners?
Yes, I've got 3 books that I'd always recommend, and I think they reflect my life pretty well. There's a book currently called Game On by Marley Bing, which is just full of games that you can do with your family. They don't need any equipment. You can do it. We'd just been around Canada for a month as a 5 in a camper van and played these games all the time, and they were so brilliant. No screens,
awesome.
Just fun. And honestly, it's the best book for families or gangs of friends. We just had my parents' golden wedding anniversary, and the 15 of us played these games. All generations. Brilliant book. Game On by Marley Bing. There's a book called Palindromes and Anagrams that came out in 1973, which I read every couple of years, and that reflects my brain. That's why I got into Countdown. It's by someone called Howard Bergerson. And there's also a book called The Pebble Spotter's Guide by Clive Mitchell, which is all about pebbles, which I think is brilliant. I think all kids should read that. So
nice. Amazing. It's rare to get books that haven't come up before, because I think we're episode 127-ish. But I'm pretty sure that there's 3 there that haven't come up previously. That's 8.
They're pretty nerdy.
Amazing. Game On, they sound fantastic. Game On sounds perfect. I'm going to buy that.
Yeah, get that straight away. It's quite new. I think it's only a couple of years old, but it's really well written and easy to understand. I hate it when a game is explained and you don't understand it, which is, again, key to Taskmaster. I think it's got to be.
Yeah. Like those one-liners, you said.
Yeah.
One-line tasks. Fantastic. And then number 4 is we always dedicate every episode to someone, and we bestow or hospital pass that honour, depending on your view, to our guest, who has to give their reason why.
Right.
So would you dedicate this episode, Alex?
Can I dedicate this episode to the underpaid jazz musician out there, or the aspiring jazz musician? I haven't got one in mind, but I don't like jazz. But I really like the idea of jazz. And I used to go and watch lots of jazz at the Edinburgh Fringe because of my friends who were jazz musicians. And I've been to Ronnie Scott's lots of times. I performed there lots of times. And it's my favourite place in the world. But it's really hard to make a living as a jazz musician. And during the pandemic, everyone was affected. But live musicians, work just went. But I just think they're doing something that they really believe in, but not many other people do.
Yes.
And I can go down YouTube rabbit holes. Last night I watched somebody I'd not heard of called Wynton Marsalis, who I think is really famous in that world. He's a trumpeter, and just have a Google of him. You could spend hours just watching these people. They're so talented, and they stick to their guns. They're much more sensible things to be doing, but it's really tough. So I would like to dedicate this episode to the unknown jazz musician.
Amazing. This episode is very proudly dedicated to the unknown, underpaid and aspiring jazz musicians. I must give a quick nod and a shout out to Jake Saunders, friend of the show. And he is heavily into his jazz, and he's a very talented musician and writer. And I'll never forget a tip he gave me about making mistakes. I think it probably refers mostly to when you're playing an instrument, but I think it's probably also applicable elsewhere. But he said jazz musicians are taught that if they make a mistake, just make the same mistake a couple of more times.
That's good.
So it becomes intentional, and then it's just not noticed, which I loved.
Well, you know what, Giles? We embrace that. I hate to always talk about Taskmaster, but the studio task at the end, we don't have a chance. We don't do retakes for that, and sometimes it goes wrong. And our key is just embrace the mistake.
Yeah,
let's just celebrate it and find it funny.
Yes,
people love mistakes. I always find it funny when at the end of a snooker tournament on the BBC they show the blooper reel as if it's the funniest thing ever, and it's often just the referee has dropped the ball. But people just love mistakes, and I would always say that You've Been Framed is probably the funniest program out there.
Yeah.
Which is depressing as a comedian.
Yeah. Mistakes are great. They're a leveler of sorts.
Yeah.
Amazing. Alex, listen, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure and a privilege.
Well, thanks, Giles. I really enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully I'll see you at the Meadow for another Cheshire United experience soon. We're doing that charity match again in May, so see you there, if not before.
Would love that. I must ask, before we go, how can our listeners get more Alex Horne?
Well, I don't think they need more, so I would find other people. But yeah, on Taskmaster's rumbling on. We're doing this Horne Section tour next year. Come and see the Horne Section. We're still very culty, we've realised. We have got a second series of our sitcom coming out on Channel 4, but it doesn't seem to make any difference in terms of numbers. There are certain people who like us, and that's enough. We are very niche. But yeah, do come and see us. I promise it'll be a good night out.
Well, we'll include links to everything we've discussed, to Game On, palindromes and anagrams, the Pebble Spotter's Guide, Taskmaster. The Horne Section is doing something over Christmas, right? So we'll
we've got a one-off show at the O2. So yeah, come and find us.
Fantastic. Finally, thank you to everyone listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do share and review the pods. Keep your questions and guest requests coming in. To get in touch, it's easy to find Gasp online, or email the mouthful, that is calltoaction@gasp.agency.
We interrupt this podcast to announce that we will never interrupt this podcast with ads. Ads that awkwardly nudge you to contact the... Sorry.
I can't get no call to action. I can't get no call to action, but I try, and I try, and I try, and I try. I can't get no call to action. Oh, I can't get no call to action. Yeah, hey, hey.